Okay, so I'm going to start out with an apology. I get it. I know people probably felt cheated. Well, I know at least one person felt cheated yesterday because I didn't put out an actual video. I just put out or changed a video from a members only video to a public video. That video, even though it wasn't anything that was directly from me, still actually represents several hours or many hours worth of work, a couple of days worth of work, with collecting the clips and then putting them onto the screen so that you can see the date and which media channel they came from. So even though that wasn't something that I worked on yesterday, it is still something that I put quite a bit of work into. Now, like I said, I know people feel kind of cheated that I didn't put a video out yesterday. But just to give you some perspective in terms of what goes on in the background, not only do I work on researching the videos that I'm putting out each day, I'm also researching other things relating to this case, things that don't necessarily come out in a video. But in terms of each of the videos that I put out that is actually me breaking things down or looking at inconsistencies and stuff like that, there's a lot of time that goes into that before you get the finished product. Just the going through transcripts to find the right clips that I need, collecting the clips, editing the clips, that can be 6 or 7 hours work on its own. If it's a big video, if it ends up being a 2-part video, then you're talking about a few days worth of work. Then there is going through documents. It may be that I have to find a specific news article or that I'm looking for specific text messages from Daniel or Malaya. There's lots of work that goes into preparing these videos before I even start recording. When I record a video, you can probably look at the length of that video and times it by 4 at the very least in terms of how long it has taken me to do that video. Although even that's probably underestimating. I know there was a half-hour video that I did the other day. I think that was about 4 hours from when I started recording to when I pressed save. If it's a long video, then just waiting for it to save takes a lot of time. And then I have to process that video for uploading, and I have to upload that video. So sometimes from when I finish recording, you're still looking at a few hours worth of work before that video is finally ready to go public. I know a lot of people just hop on a live and they pull up clips as they go along and they just chat away. And if they've done their preparation beforehand, then basically the time they've put in has been into finding a document or collecting clips. But because they are going live, because they're sharing a screen, they tend to just, click on this YouTube channel, let's play this clip from this timestamp. So there is a lot less work involved if you're going to just press a button and go live. Yes, if you want to do it properly, you've got to do preparation beforehand. But when you're pre-recording like this, there's so much more work that goes into it. So occasionally I do get exhausted. There are some days when I put in up to 16 hours working on this case. There are some nights when I press save on a video and it's taking forever to save. And I wait up for it to finish saving so that I can then set it to processing, go to bed for a few hours, get up when it's finished processing, put it onto YouTube, and then a few hours later, get up again so I can do the final adjustments to the setting and press live. So if there are days like yesterday when I'm just too exhausted to sit down and put a video together, that's why. Now I also need to apologise once again for the fan noises in the background. I've got a crappy audio jack, so I can't hear on playback how bad that is, so hopefully it's not too bad. Now what you can see on the screen in front of you is one of the videos that Tint did when he was searching. This part I've got about 10 minutes worth of, but later on in the video you'll see the first half of this. But I thought it was significant and I thought it was important to show you this so you could see some of the terrain that people were going over, because I think that is really significant when we start to talk about these boot prints. So like I said, there's a lot of confusion when it comes to the boot prints on the Pipeline Trail. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the exact location that they were found. That is based on GPS coordinates. I actually have two lots of coordinates. One lot of coordinates is the coordinates that Please Bring Me Home were working with. And then for some reason on their map they added a second set of coordinates, but it's only like a very short distance apart in terms of location. It's insignificant if you ask me. Now there's been confusion over whether it was a single boot print or if it was a clump of boot prints or what the story was, so I'm going to clarify that for you. There's also been claims that, well, this shows the searchers didn't go out far enough and the children are probably still out there because they didn't search far enough. I'm going to debunk that for you. Also, there is the claim that, well, the boot print's the right size, so that proves it had to have been Lily's boot print. Going to delve into that a bit more and show you why that is flawed logic. I heard one content creator claiming that, well, they got it out that far because essentially they stuck to open paths and stuff. So of course they got out that far. And I'm going to cover that as well and discuss why that is not logical. His idea that, yeah, they could have got that far out and further just by sticking to open paths. And then there is this claim that is being made that they discovered the boot prints and called off the search. Essentially, they called off the search for the night, which is also not true. So there's quite a lot of things that I want to cover in this video. I've tried to organise everything in a logical order, but there's a lot to cover, so I can't guarantee that it's the most logical order, but I've done my best. So bear with me, and hopefully by the end of this video I will have clarified a lot of the questions, a lot of the misinformation that is floating around.
Did you find out that night, or was it the next day, about the boot prints?
I actually found out, I think it was the next day. And then when I asked investigators when the boot print was found, they told me they weren't sure on the exact time it was found, but they thought it was found during the middle of the night.
Now, I'm going to double back to that because there's a few more discussions in terms of the timeline between him and the turkey guy, and they seem to be somewhat confused over a few things in relation to how the boot prints were found and where they were found. So I will be coming back and doing some dispatch audio relating to that. I just want to point out, so Daniel's saying that he asked them when the boot prints were found. They said they didn't know, but they think it was the middle of the night. Now, we are talking about a massive, massive search. You had search groups from multiple organisations there. Not only that, but the search was going 24/7 for the first 3 or 4 days at the least. I'm not sure how long. I know definitely for the first 2 or 3 days it was 24/7. The search did not stop. Meaning that in terms of the search commanders, there was a daytime search commander and a nighttime search commander. They were putting in long hours. And of course you've got all these ground crews, all these searchers in different areas. So in terms of the officer that said to Daniel, we found these boot prints, they're not going to know every single detail of the search, because they're not the person sitting on the radio, the search commander, who is sitting on the radio and basically directing radio traffic and organising people to go to different tasks based on what has been found. They can only give the information that they have been given. But Daniel has run with that. Not only has he run with that, but he's shared it with this Turkey guy who is now also putting out misinformation. And I have to say, my advice for any content creator out there who is wanting to put out factual information, don't rely on Daniel Martel. For starters, we know he's a bit of a mathematician. So his memory of things may not be quite so correct. Not only that, the guy is very good at changing the story to suit his needs. So when it comes to something that you can verify by going through dispatch audio, by listening to media reports, by going through the documents, that's what you need to do. And that is the reason why I have a playlist that is called the Lily and Jack Case File, because that has all those primary sources for anyone to go to so they can access information directly from the source, either by listening to the dispatch, listening to the news stories, or listening to interviews. That case file is there for any content creator to use should they wish to do so. If they want to create transcripts, they can email me and I will suggest a few different websites where they can create transcripts. I'm no longer sharing my transcripts because the last time I shared my transcripts with a content creator, that content creator then did a video or went live pretty much straight after that and was like, hey, here are the transcripts that I've created, and did a live based on my transcripts. And hey, there's nothing wrong with that, so long as you give me credit. All it takes is to say, yeah, I've just been given access to Ninchi's entire folder of transcripts of interviews with all Daniel's interviews, all Belinda's interviews, all Dingbat's interviews, all dispatch audio, all media clips, all family interviews. I've just been given access to that folder by Ninchi. And thank you, Ninchi, for doing that for me. And now I'm going to base my live stream on those transcripts. It doesn't kill you to say something like that, as opposed to, well, I've got these transcripts and, trying to get together a whole collection of transcripts, and here's a few different sites where you can get transcripts, forgetting to mention that, hey, Ninchi suggested these to me. So, yes, if you are a content creator and you want to use my case file so that you have accurate information, and you want to use transcripts so you can find things quickly, by all means, I will recommend different sites that you can use for transcripts. But no, I'm not going to share my folder that is chockers full of so many different transcripts anymore, because I'm just sick of doing the work and not getting any credit. Anyway, sorry, little side rant there. Let's get back to the video.
Okay. And I know, and I made a mistake, guys, and I want to premise this was my mistake. I had indicated that this image here was a representation of what they had seen with the bare feet and the footprints. I went back and read my conversation with Daniel, so I just wanted to clarify it. What he said was that this picture, he had problems with it because he couldn't understand why a third person came, but this wasn't something that was shown to him by investigators. Kind of clarify, where did this image come from?
That image originally came from Maritime Happenings. Mom actually received it from Malaya. So Malaya sent it to my mother, and the mom and my brother came home on the ATV from their search, from where they were searching, to talk to Malaya, see what this photo was about.
So this is another thing that needs clarification. Now, why anybody would think that this was a representation of the footprints is beyond me. Because if you're going to be sent something, you would probably be sent a photo, not a stock image, because that's what this is. You can see on the right hand side of the screen, it is a stock image from iStock. It's not something that someone has sketched out and gone, hey, this is what it looks like. And in the middle is the original post from Maritime Happenings, posted at 10 a.m. on the 3rd of May. So, just got a text from a person on scene of the children's search. A police officer has located a very distinctive set of youth footprints on the natural gas pipeline. Let's hope these tracks don't fade out and can be followed. Now, it wasn't actually a police officer who located those tracks, but basically this is someone who has connections with someone who was out searching, found out pretty early on about these prints, and they clearly just searched for a stock image and used that as a picture for their post. Now, they would have done better to have just put one of the pictures that was circulating of Lily and Jack, because it did cause a lot of confusion. Even in the post, you can see there's 646 comments there, and going through that post, quite often there was questions about, is this the footprints? Clarification being, no, this is just a picture to represent the fact that that is what has been found. I figured it made more sense if I just showed you the stock image so you can see exactly that it has got nothing to do with the actual footprints that were found.
The blanket was found here. There's a road that leads back up. Now, I kind of just did a line here, but if you follow this road and you just follow this little path here, it gets you on the pipeline. I mean, sure enough, you're right in the middle between that road that they mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Have you gone down this area yourself throughout any point?
No, I haven't. I haven't done any of that area at that point.
At any point? What about now? Like, since they found the boot print and stuff like that,
No.
have you ever gone out here? Okay.
No. Mm-hmm.
What do you think about those boot prints? Who do you think they belong to?
I couldn't tell you. There's a lot of kids in the area. That's what I kind of think where they came from. But to find only one boot print the kids would have had to walk up that hill, and there's a ton of mud there, Daniel. I mean, the incline of that hill and that terrain is not easy for children. Just to walk up from the road to that pipeline would have probably taken over an hour. And by that time, the helicopters would have seen them if they were in the woods.
You know, my only problem with that is if there's mud there and it's muddy, if somebody went out there and planted them, where are their footprints?
Now, usually I take what Daniel says with a grain of salt, but I'm going to show you LiDAR maps at the end of this video to show you the sort of terrain that Daniel is talking about, and he is not wrong. There's no way these children would have walked that distance. But the funny thing is, this turkey guy has just been told by a local who knows the area that it's highly unlikely that they would have walked this distance. And he turns around, he ignores the comment that it was probably someone else out there with children, completely ignores that comment and says that if the boot prints were printed, you'd think there would be adult prints there as well. So to suit his narrative, he's ignored the possibility that the boot prints could come from other children. I do want to point out that in this instance, Daniel's actually applying logic. He's not jumping on a conspiracy theory to basically try and use that to clear his name. And he's also not jumping on the narrative that, well, these must have been Lily and Jack's boot prints. Of course, it doesn't suit his own narrative to suggest that the children did actually wander off. Because we know that the narrative that he's trying to push right now is the one that basically dumps Malaya in hot water and says that she put the children in a car and someone's got them hidden. And honestly, this is one instance where I actually agree with Daniel. It is almost certainly a situation where someone's children has been on that pipeline trail and left boot prints. And I'm going to address that more later in the video.
Now, this is here that a police dog handler located the set of footprints. Do you know if that's true? Like, how did they come across the footprints, in your opinion?
I actually heard the footprints were actually found during the middle of the night, and they actually had an untrained bloodhound up in that area. I'm not sure if that's what they're referring to by police dog handler or not, because there were so many dogs out there.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so when is the
But they did tell me they exhausted that whole area. They sent so many searchers in. They sent the dogs in. They exhausted that area for multiple days.
So I don't know where he gets this idea of they had so many dogs. There were 2 dogs, and they were trained scent hounds. And it was actually a searcher, someone on foot, who found those prints. The dog handler took his dog in a few hours later. Now, they actually did grid search the entire area, as well as sending the dog team in to check. They found no more boot prints, and the dog didn't pick up a scent. But they still went back and checked again with a considerable radius on the 31st of May, 30th and 31st, I believe it was.
We would walk up the gas pipeline trail there, and there's definitely some child-size boot prints in the mud here that are still visible. They're a bit eroded from the heavy rain, but they're still visible. So, not sure if you'd like us to continue on up the trail or what you'd like to do. Over.
Hang on, I'll let you talk. Let Greg tell you what he wants. Yeah, Lee, the gentleman that was here said that he broke some branches that he left out over the trail. So if you see those, that'd be great. But if you can send us coordinates or record coordinates of the footprints, if you're feeling up to it, I definitely recommend seeing if you can find anywhere track tracks where it goes off, and you guys want to keep walking it until you don't find tracks anymore. That's good, but just log them. Over.
Yeah, I've marked one set up on top of the hill with a stick and just a green nitrile glove, but I can go back and get some flagging tape out of my bag or just keep walking it. But they're definitely child size, and it's hard to tell how fresh they are with the rain from last night.
Yeah, and copy. When you take photos of them, do you have anything to do, anything of reference for a scale, a ruler, your hand, or something, an iPhone, etc.? Over.
Yeah, I've got my notebook, which is 6 inches, so it'll give you good reference.
And copy. Let us know if you find any more clues. Over.
So there's quite a bit of information in this one little bit of dispatch audio. He specifically says boot prints, plural. He found a set of child-size boot prints. The timestamp there is the half-hour block of dispatch audio between 4:18 a.m. and 4:48 a.m. It would have been after 4:30 based on the other dispatch audio that's there. So it wasn't found around the middle of the night or 1:30 a.m, which is another thing that this turkey guy has somehow got into his head. Was found around 4:30 in the morning. That is quite clear from the dispatch audio. Now what he says here is that they're a bit eroded from the heavy rain, but still visible. So they're not like, perfect prints where you're going to have a perfect tread. They're a bit eroded, but they're still visible. He then asks for instructions and has been asked to keep walking it until he doesn't find any more tracks. And he basically says that's what he's going to do. He is there at the site because he said he's marked one set up on the hill, but I can go back and put a flag there and then I will keep walking it. So this guy is on site at the location of the boot prints while he is on the radio. The intention is that he is going to go and he's going to flag the prints properly and then follow the prints to see where he ends up. That's important to remember, that he is on site, he is there. He has just said he will double back, he will flag them, and then he will continue searching. Because the next bit of audio is what I think is the reason why this turkey guy is claiming that they then basically downed tools and called off the search.
And rescue 2, over. Yeah, I think we'll return to base. I think we're probably talking kilometers to get to that trail intersection that Buddy had referenced. So I don't think it's something Don and I are outfitted to do tonight. Over.
Okay. Greg was listening, so we heard what you said.
This is a different search team. He said we're probably talking kilometres to get to that trail intersection. Trail intersection, clearly he is referring to the trail, like the pipeline trail, to go along to where the boot prints were found. This is not the person who just said, I have just put a stick here, I'll just double back and put a flag there and continue following, because that person was on site. He wasn't several kilometres away. This is a different team who have clearly been given the task of also going to the location where those boot prints were found to help search for more signs. This dispatch audio that we have is the main audio. This is the communication between search teams and search control, the man who is basically coordinating it all. So the things we are hearing on this dispatch audio are the things where they need to relay back to command, as opposed to communicating within their own teams. So clearly this team has been tasked with assisting with these boot prints. Now this could have been one of the dog teams, because there were 2 dog teams, and they kept going through the night. Those 2 dog teams put in God knows how many hours, but they worked really, really hard. They didn't just knock off at 6 o'clock and go, yeah, we're done for the day. But this notion that they found the boot prints and then they knocked off is wrong. This is a different team. You had one person saying, basically giving indications that he was there on scene. I've just marked them. I'll double back, I'll put a proper flag there, and then I will follow them. Then you get this second bit of audio where he's saying we are several kilometres to get to that trail intersection. This is a team that has probably put in 12 hours and are ready to finish their shift. The search did not stop at all in those first few days. As for helicopters and drone operators, they were going through much of that night. There is somewhere in the dispatch audio you hear one of the drone operators talk about it being too wet to continue. But one of the bits of audio that I'm going to play shortly is the helicopter saying that, or someone saying that the helicopter is now grounding for the night. And that is after the discovery of the boot prints, meaning that helicopter, which is also equipped with FLIR equipment, the infrared, no doubt flew the area as soon as the boot prints were discovered.
We're on the way back now, so what you're on now is called Cumberland Road, and that meets up to the spot we're going to search. We walked it, no indications from the dogs, no prints, nothing.
Now this dispatch audio is 3 hours after the original dispatch audio where they were actually talking about having found the prints. If you apply a bit of simple logic, this would appear that this is the same team, because first of all, there's been no other audio in between that first report and this report relating to the boot prints. But not only that, they're basically saying we've done the things that were discussed that we should do. We've searched the whole area, we've covered the area, we didn't find any more prints. We've had the dogs check, the dogs didn't alert. I mean, when you look at it logically, you have one team saying, or being instructed, follow the prints as far as they'll go, scout the area. We don't hear back from that team, so unless they just evaporated, then this is the same team saying, we've now covered the entire area, didn't find any more prints, the dogs didn't alert. So that means this team spent 3 hours out there covering the area straight after those prints were found. And they got the dog there. Now, I don't know if this team had a dog with them or if the dog handler was called to that spot. But they had the dog there as well within 3 hours of the prints being located. So, no, they did not discover the prints and then down tools. They discovered the prints, they got instructions. Those instructions were to make sure they marked them, which they did. They said they were doubling back to put proper ribbon there. They had to measure the boot prints, take photos, and see if they could follow them as far as they could. So they did a really thorough check of the area straight away. They didn't go, hey, there's boot prints, let's go to bed. Like I said, I'd imagine that confusion comes from the fact that the subsequent dispatch audio was another team saying that that location is several kilometres away. We know that's not the team that were there when the boot prints were found, because they were on location. It was another team that must have been asked to go in. Maybe it was the second dog team, maybe it was the dog team and they needed to be picked up and taken to that location, because a lot of the dispatch audio, when you listen to it, is people organising to be picked up at various locations.
309, command is requesting a photograph be taken and sent to the command phone if possible, if they're self-service. And could you please send the coordinates for those prints? Over.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be back at my truck in about 30 seconds.
So you will have noticed that that bit of dispatch audio was another 2.5 hours after the second lot of audio that we listened to. So between 7:17 and 7:47, we heard this team saying, we've covered the entire area, the dogs didn't alert. And now you have another bit of audio between 9:46 and 10:16 where they're asking for coordinates and they want photos. And the guy's going, well, I'm nearly back at my truck now. So that means that even after this team had said, look, we've covered this area, the dogs didn't alert, they didn't down tools and say, that's it, we're done. I don't know if it was the same team, but we still had a team in the area of those boot prints for the next 2.5 hours. And that's only what we're hearing on the dispatch. We don't know, after that, what else was done in the area. So you are looking at a minimum of 5.5 hours searching in that location where the boot prints were found immediately after they were found. Nobody downed tools. They focused on that area. They took the dogs in, they covered it extensively. Now, I do believe it was Daniel who originally claimed that they found the boot prints and down tools. But this Turkey guy has run with it. He hasn't tried to fact check, he's just taken Daniel at his word. And now he is repeating it on his live streams. I only heard it the night before last. So this is something that is now being perpetuated, and it is not factual. They canvassed that area thoroughly for at least 5.5 hours after the prints were discovered. Most likely for longer. Okay, I'm going to go through some of the news clips that also discuss these boot prints.
There was at one point a possible footprint identified, and based on that, the searchers have now started doing grid searches around that area just to expand to see if there's anything from that.
So you'll notice that he referred to it as a boot print. Now, I believe his role was basically he was search commander. But, you know, this is May the 4th. This is the day after it was located. This guy will have been organising search crews, flat out. So, in terms of him saying boot print as opposed to boot prints, that's simply a case of nobody has had a chance to breathe. It's not like they're sitting around in some cushy staff room somewhere discussing all the things that have been found. They're operating on the fly. So, he's been told about the boot prints. He's probably been told a million other things. So in his mind, when he's speaking to the media, he spoke about I think he said a footprint. This is the first time we heard about it as a public, because this is even before Paula got hold of the dispatch audio. So other than anyone who was following that maritime happenings page, then until this interview was done, a lot of people wouldn't have heard about the boot print. And it's that situation where the first thing you hear is the thing that sticks in your head. So for most of us, we refer to it as the boot print because we're thinking it is a singular thing, because this is what he has told the media. There's also a few different accounts in the documents, which creates confusion as well, and I'll get to that. But you heard quite clearly in the dispatch that they were referring to boot prints as in plural.
The search for the missing Sullivan siblings, Lily and Jack, will resume in the morning. Police announced they'll be joined by ground search and rescue teams to once again head into wooded areas. They're going to focus specifically on areas around Garlick Road and the nearline Pipeline Trail near the family's home. It's also where a boot print was found in earlier searches.
So in terms of timeline, we know that on, I believe it was the 8th of May, and I'm probably speaking Australian terms, so it could have been the 7th, but about 6 days after they were reported missing, the search was scaled back. Then they went back on the 17th and 18th, and they focused again around the house, and then on the 30th and the 31st, they once again returned, and they focused on the house and on the pipeline in the area where those prints were found. Now the next clip is from CBC, and it was a timeline that they did on the 16th of May. So this was just before the announcement that they were sending searchers back out there, and CBC were doing their best to keep the story going, so they did a recap of the timeline. And what is mentioned here with regards to the boot print is important.
RCMP said searchers had located what could have been a footprint on Saturday and expanded the search effort in that area. That night, 4 drones with thermal imaging technology were used to look for heat signatures in the woods.
Now, if you actually go through news articles from the first couple of weeks, what you will discover is that in those first 3 or 4 days, they had at least 6 drones up. But what she's saying here is that the evening after the boot prints were found, they had 4 drones up searching the woods. The reason they do it in the evening is because that is when it is cooler, so heat sources show up better on the fleur. That said, there were still drones up during the day on May the 3rd. What she's referring to is them also being up during the evening, taking advantage of it being cooler to see if they could find heat sources. So after locating the boot prints, not only did you have searchers go in and spend at least 5.5 hours in that area, you've just heard them talking about drones, checking for heat sources, and like I said, we know they had drones going the whole time. They only came down to change batteries. There were 2 helicopters up over the first couple of days.
The boot print was on the pipeline, which is why we're extending our search efforts down the pipeline. We don't know for sure it was from the children, but it's the only real thing we've had to go on thus far, so we're just kind of investigating that further.
Hansen said about 65 people were in the woods on Saturday and Sunday, and 3 drones were also deployed to help. RCMP said a total of 8.5 square kilometers has been grid searched, but as of Sunday afternoon, Hansen said there weren't any new finds, and the search was suspended again.
So this is when they went back at the end of May They had 65 searches there. She's also referred to it as boot print, so you can see why it has stuck. And I will go into it further as to why it keeps being referred to as a boot print when we originally heard mentioned as boot prints, plural, and why there is two different discussions in the documents. But she also says they grid searched the area and they had 3 drones as well. Grid searched means basically you have people in a line and they cover a straight line in that line. And they have a grid that they work. And it's not just a case of they walk in a straight line to the end of the rectangle and they're done. Grid searches basically mean they'll do it in one direction, then they'll do it in the other direction, and they will also do a cross. So it is like a grid. It's like a mesh because they're doing it from 2 directions each way. It is a really, really thorough way of searching.
So when the boot print was found, we told the team just to send us the coordinates. We got a picture. Yeah, it looks like a children's rubber boot print, which is what we were looking for. Conversed with the incident commander. Yeah, we're going to send. We sent an RCMP K9 in first. Then we sent human tracking teams, so like man trackers. So we have some members that have been trained to do tracking themselves. We sent them in and we did some grid searching in the area to see, just follow up. And the RCMP forensics unit went in and did actually a cast of the boot print. We did investigate a few wells and mine shafts. The teams came across them in the woods so they would look in them as best they could. There was one mine shaft we actually ended up flying a drone into to see if there was any sign of anything going in there because it wasn't safe to send people in.
So she's given a really clear explanation here. As soon as they found that boot print or the boot prints, they sent a canine in, and then after the dog had been in, they sent human trackers, as in trackers, people who know what to look for to see if someone's been through the area. And then they did a grid search. So the area was done twice with grid searches. It was done immediately after the boot prints were found, and it was done again at the end of May. And she said they discovered wells and mines, which they checked. One mine, they had to send a drone down because it was too dangerous. So she's showing you just how clearly, how efficiently they checked that area. If that had been Lily's boot print, then either the dogs would have picked up on something or one of the trackers would have picked up on something. You have boot prints in mud. That could not have been the only muddy location between the house and wherever the children ended up. If you are trying to push this theory that they did wander off and searchers just didn't search hard enough or far enough. And I'm going to come back to that.
How do I know they weren't in the woods since that's a brief search? I know those kids. I've observed those kids. As I said, I walked with those kids through the woods. I had to carry Jack through the woods. He wouldn't go through the woods. He would stand there. He wouldn't go over a branch. He wouldn't go under a branch. I had to carry him over them. So I know they're not in the woods. As I said, I don't even like going through the woods because I don't like walking over trees and branches and bush. Could you imagine a 6 and a 4-year-old going through the woods?
Now, obviously, when we're listening to Janie, we have to question if there is a reason behind what she's saying and if what she's saying is perhaps a distortion of the truth or an outright lie. But what she's saying makes sense. We've heard about the amount of storm damage in the area. And you can see from the video from Tint that it was pretty rough terrain. He was sticking to paths for the most part, but even those paths were covered in leaf litter and the ground was rough and uneven. And these children were apparently in little gumboots. Who's going to walk far in gumboots for starters? But we're talking about a 4 and a 6-year-old in extremely difficult terrain. Not only that, there's news clips where you see the reporters flicking away ticks and black flies and stuff. There's one news clip where this guy is talking, he's flicking insects away from him, and you can actually see the ticks on the ground behind him. We heard how many searchers just became worn out because of how difficult the terrain was. And we're supposed to believe that they got all the way over to that pipeline area where those boot prints are? It doesn't make sense. You know, Janie has said Jack would just stop. If Jack didn't want to go, Jack didn't want to go. She said even she doesn't like going through the woods. And we're talking about a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. It's not a group of hikers who are just going to put on their hiking boots, start walking, and just keep going at a steady pace all day and not stop. These are little kids who are going to get tired very, very quickly in that sort of terrain. Now, like I said, yes, we do have to question Janie's motivation, and we have to question if she's trying to distort the truth a little bit when she says these things. But she's not the only person that was saying this.
So we left again, and that's what we did. We went up past their place, and there's another road that goes in past where the train tracks are. We went up and through there, and we cut across. We come across a couple of brooks, but right away it was hitting me that there's just no way these kids would be in these woods. It was just like a jungle. That we looked through deer paths, and a lot of those were blocked off. Rabbit trails, a lot of animals will use the same trails. We followed what trails we could, and they always came to dead ends. We walked the woods road for, oh my gosh, for about an hour and a half. We walked the woods roads, and all the time I'm calling out for them. And nothing, just nothing other than ribbons. There were ribbons everywhere throughout the woods. That's all you seen was ribbons.
So not only do you have Belinda confirming exactly what Janie said, it's not the sort of terrain that these kids would have been heading off into, but you hear her talking about there were ribbons everywhere, showing just how thoroughly searched the area was. And I know this turkey guy is pushing the idea that, oh, they just didn't search far enough. Well, I don't buy that at all. And I'm going to come back to that.
As much as that would have been helpful during the search, had they come out forward with an accurate time of disappearance, the perimeter most likely would have been spread out. And so we would have most likely have seen a scenario where they could have found the boot prints much earlier than 1:30 in the morning, right before they pack it up for the night, which I thought was a huge mistake too. You find the boot prints and you pack it up for the night. To me, that, I get it. It's late at night. It's freezing. It's starting to rain pretty good and things like that. So, you got to look out for the health of the people that are out there. You don't want to add to the amount of victims you have, but I know some people may have asked, like, well, why not send out like the FLIR in that moment, the drone? Well, I know that it was starting to rain at that point, and it was raining pretty good. So I don't know how that would have affected the flight pattern of
Now, I've already addressed this comment that he made about them finding the prints at 1:30 and then packing up for the night. That is not what happened. You heard the dispatch. For starters, they found the prints sometime after 4:20 in the morning. But they didn't pack up for the night. They sent in the troops, essentially. They went in, they thoroughly checked the area, even with dogs. He also then says, well, you know, they couldn't have sent the drones out because of the weather. Now, I do believe that at that time they had downed the drones because the rain was interfering with their performance. But the helicopter was still up. How do we know this?
SRCC just phoned me. Your PNRR helicopter is grounded for weather. They'll update when it's available.
The helicopter was still up 3 hours after they found those prints, meaning that they definitely had to have had the helicopter covering that area. They may not have had the drones there, but you've seen that massive big round ball under the helicopters. That is the ultimate in LiDAR. The technology that they had in those helicopters was pretty damn good. They had the heat sensing technology. They had a whole heap of other technology that was part of that. But I won't go into that today. The point is, they did have the helicopter up with spotters and with heat sensing technology after they found those boot prints. So that is also inaccurate to say, oh well, they didn't check it with drones. It's like he is deliberately trying to find excuses as to why these boot prints had to have been Lily and Jack, trying to explain away why they didn't find them even though they found the boot prints. The simple fact is they weren't Lily's boot prints or Jack's boot prints. Now the other thing he's trying to push here is that they miscalculated the search area because Malaya and Daniel gave the wrong time in terms of when the children went missing. That is also incorrect. And we have dispatch audio which proves that.
In their bedroom, we called this morning, and they haven't been seen since then. Therefore, otherwise, what are the details? Have they been gone a long time? 0800.
So the first bit of audio, in case you didn't catch what he said, was they were in the bedroom at 8 o'clock this morning and haven't been seen since. So that is the first bit of information that Malaya gave the RCMP. And then the next bit of audio you hear is, how long have they been gone? And the guy said 0800 this morning, as in 8 a.m. this morning. So they went into this search with the understanding that the children hadn't been seen since 8 o'clock this morning. That means that they would have calculated their search area based on that amount of time. Now, when they go into searches like this, they calculate distances based on how long the children have been gone and the ages of the children. We know that they have been told the children were last seen at 8 a.m, meaning that is how they would have calculated the distance they needed to search. What would have happened first would have been a hasty search. That is basically where your ground crew cover all the open areas, all the paths, all the tracks. And then they double back and do a grid search. While they are doing that, you've got drones and helicopters up in the air covering as much area as they can. And they are not contained to that small radius. And in terms of the search, at least one dog team there before 11 o'clock. The helicopter arrived not long after 11. That's the first of 2 helicopters. And the first drone operator was on site sometime before 11:30. So they had eyes in the sky pretty damn quickly. And they had a dog team there pretty damn quickly. Like I said, yes, they start with their hasty searches, covering every open area extending out from where the children went missing, and they double back and do their grid searches. But the drones, the helicopters, they are covering a much larger area. And here is something I would like explained by those people who seem to think that the boot prints were Lily and Jack. Why is it the search team were told that the children were in their room at 8 o'clock and haven't been seen since? And yet we know Malaya was on the phone trying to call her mother at 8:28. But she claims that she only noticed at 20 to 10 that the children were missing. Explain that. Because if they were last seen and heard at 8 a.m, wouldn't you think she would have noticed at 8:30 when she's trying to ring her mother that, hey, there's no sign of the children? Because clearly by saying they were last seen at 8 a.m, or they were last heard at 8 a.m, clearly that would indicate that she would have known at 8:30 that they were missing, not at 20 to 10. So you have this massive problem with the timeline, and that's just one of God knows how many different problems. How do you justify that and turn around and say, well, that was their boot print on the pipeline trail and the searchers just didn't go out far enough? You can probably hear there is a massive thunderstorm coming in. I currently have Mouse wrapped around my arm. I have my other 2 dogs pretty much underneath my chair, but I'm going to push on. So just looking at what was said in the documents. So this is from the report from Amy Hansen, who you just heard from a little while back. And here it says boot prints, plural, were found on the pipeline by GSAR Friday night into Saturday morning. And we know it was early Saturday morning. There were clumps of them and there were 2 different sizes. So that's where that information comes from. She said they were small in size and corresponded to what children would wear. They focused their search in that area because of the boot prints. They did grid searches in the area of the boot prints and expanded out to waterways in that area as well. So they went quite a distance. They conducted more searching in the area of the house. They brought in heavy urban dogs who use air scenting to find people that are alive. They heard reports of people with kids out searching, so they were not sure the boot prints belonged to Lily and Jack. They did think it was an out-of-the-way area for people to bring their kids to search. See, here's where I have a problem with that. Remember when Daniel did that interview on the pipeline trail on Lansdowne Road, and I was making jokes about the sign behind him warning people of Daniel running faster than helicopters and stuff like that. But that sign is there to warn motorists that basically they're going through an area that is a recreational area. Basically saying, watch out for people crossing the road here, because basically that is where the pipeline goes across the road. Now, why am I saying that? Because it's simple as this. If you have someone go missing in an area that you are familiar with, then you are going to search based on your own personal experience with that area. that pipeline trail is clearly a popular trail because there is a sign there warning motorists to watch out for people crossing the road when they are using that pipeline trail. So if you have locals going in and they want to search the area, if they're going in there with a four-wheeler especially, then the easiest area for them to access is going to be that pipeline trail. And if it's someone who lives further down that road, then that particular part of the pipeline trail might be the area where they are most familiar. Not only that, but people were asked not to go into the immediate search area in those first couple of days. So in terms of civilian searches, then yes, it is quite possible that there would have been locals searching the area on that pipeline trail with their children. But not only that, they made it quite clear that they didn't know how old the boot prints were because of the rain. So, for all we know, someone could have gone there the weekend before and left boot prints in the mud. Maybe they dried out and then you get the rain washing them out a little bit more. And you have to take into account accessibility as well. If someone is wanting to go out and search as a family, you've heard what the tracks were like. So if you're taking kids out to help search, then you need to find a location that is going to be manageable for young children. Note also, they mentioned that there were 2 different sizes of boot prints. And yet, we're only hearing about one of those sizes matching to Lily's boots. If they were to say, yeah, we matched one set to Jack and one set to Lily, then you might want to start paying attention. But there's no mention of the size of the other set of boot prints. There's no mention that they even got a decent cast from the other size of boot prints. Now here's the information with regards to matching the size of the boot print. So this is the analysis of boot print located during search. So it sounds like of that cluster of boot prints, they only managed to take a cast of one boot print, which suggests that it's quite possible that those boot prints could have been there for some time. They may well not have been fresh boot prints. So she talks about that the forensic services took a cast of the located boot print on the pipeline trail. So it does sound like there was only one boot print that was worth taking a cast of. And they said the cast showed a specific number 29 as part of the tread. She wondered if the number was based on design or size. Now we know that that's the UK sizing, basically. And then you have this constable going to Walmart and they located several sizes of the same boot. And the number consistent with the case, 29, was only found on size 11, which then they talk about actually that is the size that Lily had. Now this seems to be the main argument that this Turkey guy keeps making in terms of his belief that it was definitely Lily and Jack. But here's the thing, we're talking about Walmart and we're talking about, they refer to them as rain boots. There is a massive range at Walmart of these rain boots. Various designs. It's not just the dinosaurs for Jack and the rainbow unicorn ones for Lily. There were quite a few designs there. not only that, if you actually do a Google image search for those boots, what you find is that there are other business chains that sell the same boots. These are cheap boots that are made in China. So that tread pattern is not going to be overly unique for starters. But not only that, we're talking about boots from Walmart. This is an area that is a low socio-economic area. How many families are going to be going to Pumpkin Patch, which you probably don't have in Canada or America, but in Australia that's kind of like the exclusive shop where you go to get designer clothes and shoes for your little tackers. But we're talking about Pictou County and specifically Lansdowne Station. This is not a wealthy area. Chances are every child in their school owns a pair of Walmart rain boots. Chances are a majority of kids that live in the area own Walmart rain boots. So the chances that another child is going to have exactly the same size of boots with the corresponding SKU number underneath are pretty good. You will note there is nothing in here that says that they matched the tread pattern. There is no mention here of the tread pattern being exactly the same. They're just saying the boot size was exactly the same. For all we know, based on the information here, this could have been a kid in a set of runners that had the UK size written underneath. So while this turkey guy is claiming that the tread pattern is the same, it is not. There is nothing in this document that says that the tread pattern was the same. The only match they have is the size. You cannot tell me that one child in the area is the only child who wore size 11 shoes. And given that they come from Walmart, there's a pretty good chance that there were other children in the area that wore the same size shoes. Now, the other argument that this turkey guy has made was, well, if it was someone else with their children, why haven't they come forward and said, hey, my kid was there and that's their shoe size? First of all, we don't know that someone hasn't come forward and said, hey, I've just read this, or I've seen this in the news articles, or I'm following this case on YouTube and they've started talking about these boot prints. We don't know, because until these documents came out, we didn't know that the size was the same. So, for all we know, someone could have contacted RCMP and went, hey, that was me with my kid, I was there the weekend before. Or that was me with my kid, we were there searching. We live further down the road, so we headed towards where the children lived. That's why we're in that section. If it was someone who had been on that pipeline trail prior to the children going missing, then they may have just thought, well, they may not have made the connection and realised that actually that was their child's boot prints. But let's be real here too. So many people have turned this case into a circus. If you had been out on that pipeline trail with your children and you realise that's your child's boot print, so that means that actually it's not really relevant to the case, then you're probably not going to go and contact a YouTuber, because otherwise you're going to have everybody going after you and saying you're somehow involved with the case. And if someone had contacted RCMP then, like I said, we don't know everything that is going on in the background with this case. And if someone heard about it and went, hey, that's ours, our kids' boot prints, like I said, they wouldn't have heard about it till after these documents came out. Meaning it's not going to be in the documents. You really don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure these things out. Now, one thing we do have in the documents is this mention that there are 70,000 drone photographs to review. Like I said, the drones and the helicopters weren't limited to the immediate search area that was covered in those first few days. You had at least 6 drones out there in the first 2-3 days. You had 2 helicopters out there in the first couple of days. That's a lot of footage to go over. And that is a larger area. So if that had been Lily and Jack out there on that trail, then you can bet there would be some footage of that. And we would have heard about them returning to search that area. Now, I watched some of this Turkey guy's show, and he's put forward this theory that the location of the pink blanket, the children just followed that logging road right to the end and then cut across to the pipeline trail, which is why the boot prints are there. Now, the reason there's 2 markers there, I think I explained this at the beginning of the video. You have the original GPS location, which is the one labelled boot print. Then the one that is just a little bit further back is a location, a GPS location that Please Bring Me Home added to their map for some reason. I'm not sure why they added that. I don't know exactly why that would occur. But what you have here is the location of the boot print is actually quite a distance from the pink blanket location, given that the terrain, given how dense the woods were, given that the children were in gumboots or rain boots, whatever you want to call them. And let's talk about the being out in the open. Remember what I said about when they first start searching, they do a hasty search? That means they check all the open trails, all the open areas first, before narrowing in to a grid search. You had the helicopter there less than an hour after they were reported missing, or within an hour of them being reported missing. They would have been looking at these open trails. This theory of, well, the location of the pink blanket and the location of the boot shows that they must have been sticking to open trails. Well, the problem with that theory is that wouldn't they have stayed on open trails, and in which case they would have been spotted by a drone or a helicopter. Now, it's easy enough to look at this on Google Earth and think it's all fairly flat. And think, well, hey, you know, that's not a huge distance. Of course these children could have walked that distance. But when you look at it with LiDAR, because basically at that point in time you've stripped away all the vegetation, you can see exactly what the terrain is like. For starters, the location of the pink blanket, if you look across the other side of Lansdowne Road from where the pink blanket was located, you can see that is really, really steep all the way up. So they would have been having to go down extremely steep hills, with the closest path being the pipeline trail. So even just getting to Lansdowne Road from Gellock Road, for little children, that would have been a challenge. you can see how rough the terrain is. And then even from the blanket site to the location on the pipeline where the boot prints were found, it is still, it's undulating. It's not all level terrain. You can see there's gullies in between. There's one massive gully alongside the pipeline. It's a rough area. This is not an easy stroll for a 4 and a 6-year-old. It would be almost impossible for a 4 and a 6-year-old, especially wearing rain boots. Take a look at the terrain around the house. So on the LiDAR map, that little horseshoe shape is the location of the house. It's all steep hills all around. The children would have had to have gone up a really steep hill, whichever way they went. Now with these ones, I haven't done it exactly side by side because I wanted to pan out with the LiDAR to show you the trail. So I've marked that old road with the pink dots. You can see, you just have to look at the LiDAR to see how rough that terrain is. So had the children wanted to go that way, they would have been knackered before they got anywhere near Lansdowne Road. You could say, well, maybe they went along Gairloch Road. Well, wouldn't you think someone would have noticed 2 children strolling along Gairloch Road early in the morning? For starters, the bus went through, the school bus. So if they were strolling along the road when he was going through, he would have seen them. He would have stopped. For them to have headed towards Lansdowne Road from the house, they would have been going over some really, really rough terrain. It wasn't just a nice, easy stroll along a nice, flat, level path. Now, those boot prints were the only ones that were discovered. But here's the thing. The other thing you can do with these LiDAR maps is show the water flow in the area. So I pulled this up. Now, some of this might have been a little bit dry, although we know that that spot where it crosses the pipeline trail was still wet and boggy and muddy. So basically, from the pipeline trail all the way down to Gairloch Road is a barrier of soggy muddiness at the very least. But if not mud, then you actually have all this water running straight down to the Middle Pictou River. For these children to get from 1407 Gairloch Road across to Lansdowne Road and then onto the pipeline, they had to go through other areas that would have been muddy. They had to cross water, meaning if those boot prints that were found on the pipeline trail happened to be Lily's, then they should have found boot prints anywhere around these flows that you can see on the screen right here. There should have been earlier boot prints because there's no way they could get to that pipeline trail without first having to cross water or go through mud. So it is impossible for those boot prints to have been Lily's unless someone drove her and dropped her off on the pipeline trail at Lansdowne Road, because it was impossible. There would have to be boot prints around one of these flow lines that you can see on your screen here were those boot prints, Lily's, on the pipeline trail. Now, I've zoomed in here. What you can see for starters is there is no flow marked on the pipeline trail in the location where the boot prints were found. So that's significant for starters. That means that that would have to have been a drier area than those other areas that I just showed you. But here's the thing, and I'm going to zoom in a minute, but the elevation difference from the location where the pink blanket was found to the location of the boot prints is significant. Starting with the location that the pink blanket was found, you have an elevation of 535 feet. And it says here on the map, this is on the LiDAR map, that this is high accuracy. They are able to measure it accurately because it's LiDAR. They've got the exact terrain. The location of the boot print, or boot prints plural, is 737 feet. And they've got medium accuracy. Now, medium accuracy means that, you know, give or take maybe 5-10 feet. It's not going to be like, oh, that's 200 feet out. So what you can see here is that from the location of the pink blanket to the location on the pipeline trail, that is a 200-foot gain in elevation. That is a steep hike. They've either had to have come that way, had this steep hike through this rough woods. I know this turkey guy thinks there's some magical path that goes from the end of the logging trail across to the pipeline, but I'm pretty certain that if you tried to walk it, you would find that is not the case. But you have a steep climb from the location of the pink blanket to the location of the boot prints. If you were coming just straight along the pipeline trail, you saw where there is that waterway that goes straight through the pipeline trail. They would have had to have gone through water to cross that area before they even got to Lansdowne Road. There would have been boot prints right there, but there weren't. It is a physical impossibility for the boot prints that were found in that location on the pipeline trail to have been Lily's boot prints. Now, even before we take into account the undulating terrain and the various water flows that they would have had to have crossed, if we look at the elevation for 1407 Gairloch Road, that elevation is only 433 feet. That is like 300 feet lower than the location on the pipeline where those boot prints were found. This is not the sort of terrain where a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old are going to get all the way across to that pipeline. Not a chance. So we have accounts from people who've been in the area who have said they don't believe the children could have wandered off into those woods because of how harsh the terrain was. You have massive variations in elevation. You saw the LiDAR. That's rough terrain. I don't think even I could manage to walk from 1407 Gairloch to that location on the pipeline. To get there, they had to have crossed a water flow. Regardless of whether water was literally flowing at the time, they had to have gone through mud, meaning that there should have been other boot prints long before that pipeline trail, had it been Lily and Jack. As for the size matching, that is all that matches. There is nothing in the documents that says that the actual tread matched. They did not match the tread to Lily's boots. They only matched the size. They matched it using the UK number, the 29. As I pointed out, this is a low socio-economic area, so there's probably heaps of families who buy their children's shoes at Walmart. There's probably plenty of children in the area that wear a size 11 shoe. They don't even know for certain when those boot prints occurred because they were washed out. They only got a cast from one of them. There is not one that matches Jack's boot print. You've heard that they continued to cover that area for the next 5.5 hours, possibly longer. We know that one team finished after 5.5 hours. We don't know what other teams were in there. You heard the news reports where we were told they put drones up over the area. They searched wells and mine shafts in the area. They did a grid search after sending in a dog, after sending in trackers. They thoroughly covered that area on May the 3rd. They didn't down tools the moment they discovered the boot prints and all go, yeah, we're not going to search anymore. No, they continued to search. That audio is someone saying they're in a different location, they can't get to that location to help with the search at that point in time because they are several kilometres away, which does not match the audio of the person who was on site saying this is what I've done already. The argument that they miscalculated the search distance because Daniel and Malaya made the mistake of saying that the children went missing later than what they did. No. You heard the dispatch audio. They calculated the search area based on the children having been heard or seen last at 8 a.m. They had helicopters and drones up in the first day. Not only that, they were on site pretty damn quickly. Now, from memory, I think it was around about midnight that they had to stop the drones because of the rain, which means that they had those drones up there for 12 hours on the first day. And on the first day, they had at least 4 drones. By day 2, 6 drones. First day, 2 helicopters. That is a lot of air coverage. If those kids were out in the open walking along that pipeline trail, they would have been spotted. Given that the report is that they were last seen or heard at 8 a.m, they wouldn't have even got near that pipeline trail until probably after 10, maybe after 11 even. But they wouldn't have got that far because of the terrain. And had it been them, boot prints would have been found earlier in their track because they had to cross muddy areas or actual water flows to get to that location in the pipeline in the first place. Unless, of course, they had jetpacks or they spouted wings, in which case no search area would have been big enough because they could have been long gone. So, yes, I can understand the confusion between was it a boot print or a cluster of boot prints. I think when we look at it, I think the confusion comes from the early news reports. They referred to a boot print. Yet in the dispatch, we heard them refer to them in plural, and the ground search report refers to a clump of boot prints. The reason the other portion of the document refers to a boot print is because it appears they were only able to do one cast from one boot print. That shows you how degraded those boot prints were from the rain. But let's be realistic here. We really don't need to put too much consideration into whether or not these boot prints are real or planted or have got there because of someone else searching with their children. We heard Janie give an account of running into some lady who was there searching with her children. It could have been them. But here's the thing. We have had lies and inconsistencies from all three of the adults that were on the property when those children went missing. That's what we need to be focusing on. That shows us that the boot print is irrelevant. If it was a single boot print, yes, you could say, I think it was planted. Being a cluster of boot prints, that makes me think that it was someone else out there with their children. Meaning that it's got nothing to do with Lily and Jack's disappearance whatsoever. As much as people hate to admit it, the actions of the RCMP over the past 7 months have shown us that they do not believe these children wandered off into the woods. They've stated clearly these children were never abducted. They are looking closely at the 3 people that were on the property when those children were missing. And I will bet any amount of money that they are building a case against one or more of those people. Everything we know about this case shows us these children did not wander off into the woods. Ergo, those boot prints, they're not Lily's. They're certainly not Jack's. Certainly no mention of whether the other boot print was larger or smaller. The argument that the boot prints prove that Lily and Jack wandered off really does not hold water. Not when you really look at everything else around it. And at the end of the day, if the children did wander off into the woods, explain to me why those 3 adults have felt the need to lie, to change their stories, and why they have contradicted each other so much over the last 7 months. Because that definitely does not point to the children having wandered off into the woods. So on that note, it's been quite a long one, so I'm going to finish here. Thanks for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button. Let's get this video out there into the algorithm. And please leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.